Okay, so for today, right, what we are going to do is there are certain topics which were pending from the last classes. I will pick them first. In the last class, we understood about how to write a test case in Playwright and using the Playwright test runner. And I explained like what is the structure of that structure, right? Of that, how do you write it? What we do is you write a test, right? You provide the name of the test case using this is a string. Then you have a detail object which is optional, and then you have something called what do we call it as? There is a name for it. I think we call it as fixture or what, or we call it as function. I believe. Let's say function. Now this function over here, right? What how it looks like? It looks like this. It can accept two parameters. One parameter is the fixtures, right? So page is one of the fixtures, browser is another fixture, and all that. So you can keep on passing whatever you need. And second is the test info, right? And then you create an arrow function, and this is your boundary, and you write your test case. So we learned this here in last class. What we also learned about is about hooks, right? That there are hooks involved before all, for each, after all, and after each. Okay. So every test file, you can have these, and the scope of these are just relevant to that file only. If you have two test files and you have these things there also, right? So they are meant only for that file, and whatever you mention here is relevant for this file. Okay, and we have discussed like how it works. Now there was one more thing which we discussed about, was the global setup file and global teardown, right? And we were discussing like how I explained like what is the flow, right? But we did not look into the example of like how it really functions. So today we'll work on this part. There is something called tear down and setup in the case of projects. So we'll discuss about this also. This is at the global level of the configuration. This is the configuration, the global configuration. This is the project level configuration. So we'll talk about these two, and I will also show you the impact of fully parallel when set to true. Like what impact does this thing, right, has on before all for this file. I mean, if you remember, right, let's say we have a before all method here, right, in this test file, and we have two test cases. Let's say test case one, test case two, and then you have after all, and you have before each also, let's say, and after each. In if this is set to false, right, what happens here is, as the name says, before all, before running any of the test case of this file, it will first run before all. Then it will do what? It will, before running the test case, there is a before each, so it will run before each, then the test case, and then after each. Then it will happen is it will again run before each because there's a second test case, then after each, and then after all. Okay, in the normal flow, when the fully parallel is false. But as soon as you set to fully parallel as true, now what happens is every test case can run in parallel. And to make it possible, what Playwright does is it assigns separate workers to every test case. Okay, so what will happen in that case? In that case, what happens here is that before all will run for this test case. I mean, before all will run for every test case now. So before all, then before each, then the test case, then after each, and then after all, and then again the same cycle for test case 2. So there's a difference, right? There's a difference depending on what you have run. So you have to be careful when you set the configurations. That is the whole idea of explaining this. We will see this in action, right? So let's start. So let's start this. Let me open the Playwright dev. We have the docs section. Not here, I believe. We're talking about global setup, right? So configuration file, test configuration. Do we have it here? Test file. I think it's here. Test config. If you see this, right, we're talking about. We'll first talk about this global setup. Okay. Okay. Let's first talk about the fully parallel since we discussed about it. So fully parallel, right? So we're talking about fully parallel field. If you go back to our test case, our test file looks like this. See here. Just one more second. Okay, I have these files. Okay, never mind. Let me just push it. Push origin. Wait, I am on day 6. Okay, git push origin and day 6. Git add. Git commit -m changes. Git push origin. Git push origin. Day 6. Let's get a branch for today. Git checkout -3 day 7. Okay, now let's look at the file. If you look at the file now, the file looks like this. You have a test file 1. Here what we have is, we have a before all section, we have an after all section, we have a before each section, and we have an after each section. And there are 2 test cases. This is the test case 1, and there is another test case, right? And we have another file, test file 2, right? So just to, okay, what I will do is, I will just to make things simple to understand, I will just run one file, right? So you can see in this file we have 2 test cases. We have before each and after each, and we have before all and after all. In the configuration file, let me just comment this global setup as of now. By default, if this is false, right, this is by default false only. So this is false, and let me just TestIgnore. Okay, I have set this to TestIgnore. Okay, and what else? I think we're good. So it will ignore that file. So only this file will run. Okay. Let's run this. Let's see what will be the output. Okay. Let me open a new PowerShell window. Let's just observe the output. Okay. npx playwright test. So you can see it has ran only one worker because there is only one test file running, which is test file 1. Test file 2 has been ignored. Okay, so it has 2 test cases. It has 2 test cases. So what is happening is, since I have set fully parallel as false, so what Playwright will do is, it will look at individual test files and assign one worker to every file. In my case, there is only one file, so only one worker started. That's why there is only one worker, right? But that one worker will be running 2 test cases because this file has 2 test cases. Okay, test case 2, test case 1, right? But my point here is about the hooks. Let's see how did it run. If you see here, right, where did it run? Oh yeah, it goes away before each and after each. When I scroll up now, okay, let me run it again. I hope I have not disabled anything, right? Just a second. Before each, after all, before all, yes, everything should run. Let's see. You see, right? Let it complete. Okay, see here, right? Be running before all, so before all ran once, right? Then for every test case, there is a before each will execute. So this got executed, then test case 1 executed, then after each was executed. Then what happened was, there is another test case. So you can see there's a before each ran, then test case 2 ran, then after each, and once everything was done, after all ran, right? Now let's see the behavior when I will set this to true. Fully parallel this as true. Okay. Now let's run and see the behavior. Let me open a new terminal for this. npx playwright test. Now see, it will generate 2 worker nodes, right? Because every test case can run in parallel now. That's the purpose of saying fully parallel. Okay. So there are 2 workers started. Let it complete. Although for us the execution will, I mean, from the UI it does not differ. But see what happened. For every test case, right? You can see before all ran twice. This before all ran for test case 1. Okay. Then it ran the before each for test case 1. Then test case 1 was executed, right? And then after each was executed for test case 1. And then after all was executed for test case 1, right? Then what happened was, there was a parallel activity running for test case 2. Before all ran, then before each ran for the second test case. You can see, right? Second test case. and then after each run for the second test case, and then after all run for the second test case. Okay, so why I'm telling you this specifically is so that you should be designing your test cases. I mean, keeping in mind that there is a configuration that if you change it, right, it might impact your flow of execution, right? So you have to be careful how what things you are putting where, right? Okay, it's a very strong, I would say, a way, right, to run things parallelly in Playwright. No one provides you that kind of a control that okay, you can run your test cases also in parallel. If you remember in WebDriver IO, there was no such mechanism. If you have multiple files, if you have multiple test cases in a single file, every all those test cases were running in sequence. You could not run those test cases in parallel. But here there is a power, so you have to be careful. Okay. Okay, so I hope we are clear with this part, right? Fully parallel part. Second thing, there was also a question, right, which you are trying. There is a property called TestMatch and TestIgnore. Last time, okay, what does TestMatch mean? See here, if you see test directory, right? Test directory tells you like where is your test placed. So we gave the path of the directory where our test cases are. So if you see, this is the directory, it has two test files. If I comment this out, right, it will look at all the files placed under this folder, which are these, right? So there are two test files. Now, there could be hundreds of different files there, right? Hundreds of different files. So, but in my case, there are two, right? As of now. Now, in the configuration, there is an option called test match and test ignore, which you can provide, which can help you to filter your test cases. So let's say you wanted to run only some specific test cases and not all the test cases provided in the test directory. So for that, what you have to do is you will create test match, right? Test match here, and then it's an array. It's an array where you can specify file names, comma separately. Now the problem which we were getting last time was I was I was doing what I was considering, right, the path of the file, right, from the concept of like that we are under this FS Playwright. Okay, uh, but the point, but while reading the documentation, I came to know that what you have to do is we have to give the, so earlier I was writing like this dot slash, if you see, right, even this is helping me to write it this way. So if you see, right, this is not an invalid path, it's a valid path still, but the problem here is that for this file, right, it does not expect it to be from the root location. It wants the file to be relative to this file, config file. If you see, this config file is placed under this root folder only, right? Currently this is placed there, and right, and the subsequent folder to this is test, right? So it is saying do not write this way, I do not understand this dot. What it will do is, what it wants it that it wants that, see, this path, it wants it to be relative to the config file. So if you read, if you let's say I'm giving this, let's read about this. It is doing what it is saying, like what I should say, so okay, so it is not, it will not run this way, right? What it wants it that you should remove it, right? It considers that you are currently under this folder, right? And within that, right, you have to go in the test folder. Okay, and within the test folder you have to give the file name. So that was the only change which you have to make, right, to make this work. And that's why last time it was not working. If I run it this way, right, now what will happen is it is saying test match, right? Only run the test cases which are matching this pattern. So you can see there is one file which matches this pattern, and so only this file will run. Okay, so this is how things can be executed. Similarly, there is a field called TestIgnore. The same rule applies there, right? If you wanted to specifically ignore a particular test case not to be included as part of your execution, you can again define an array and give the path of the file. And again, the path of the file has to be relative to the conf file. Okay, so again, I said test tf2. So what will happen is this file will be excluded from the execution, right? You can just play with the combination of these two. Let's say if you had hundreds of different files, right? Let's say you wanted to make sure that 5 of those files are executed, right? Then you can just create comma separated files and add them there, right? And just to make sure that some specific files are never executed, you can just place them here. Okay, and with the combination of these two and knowing what is your test directory, Playwright will be able to find the test cases and run them. right? Similarly, these again, because this is like a configuration input, right? So same inputs can be applied under the project section, right? Under the project section also, here also, right? You define a project here, right? So you can keep on adding your test match or every property which you could define in the global scope, you could define in the project scope also, as discussed in the last class. Okay, so this is how it will work. Okay, test match and test ignore. So these two are done. Coming on to this part, right? Let me just come back and revise this also. Okay, see here. Till now, I told you, right? If you have a test file one, test file. Let's take this example of the test file, and let's say test file two. Okay, so you have a before all here, you have a before each, you have a test case one, you have a after each, you have a after all. Similarly, here, right? Before, let me write 1 1 1 to it. So just to differentiate this, before all, before each two, test case two, let's say, after each two, and after all two, right? Let's say. Okay, so this is one test file, this is second test file. Now, in your conf file, what you do is in the global scope, what can you define is, see what happens here. This before all, right, will only execute if this file is running, right? And it will only run once before running any of the test case of this file, right? This is how it works. But let's say you wanted to run some piece of code before executing any of this. Before executing any of this, you wanted to run something. So where should I place it? Where should I place it? There is a way to do it. What you can do is in the conf file, in the global scope, right? There are two parameters. One is called global setup, and second is called global teardown, right? Similarly, at the project level, there is a concept of setup. Not the names are different. Okay, the names are different. It is called setup, and the second is called teardown. So these are not same thing. These are not same thing. These are different parameters, right? This is only available in the global scope. This is only available in the project scope. Okay. Now, how you should use it, right? For this part, for global setup and global teardown, right? Let's say you wanted to set up some infra, right, for the Playwright to function. So the best way, right, to place that piece of code would be through this file, global setup file. Okay. Let's say you wanted to set up some cookies in your, or let's say wanted to create some users in the application first. So what you should do is you should be using global setup. And similarly, let's say you wanted to bring down some infra and all that, you should place here. So how it functions, what it does is it needs a path to a particular file. So what I will do is I will create a file. I will create a file called, let's say, setup.ts. Okay. And what I will do here is, so this file, right, has to have a very unique, I mean, what you have to do is you have to give the path of this file over here. So what you will do is you will say require dot resolve, and you will give the path of this file. So whatever the file path is, right, let's say dot slash setup dot ts. Let's say that is the file, right? That is the path. Now here you're giving the path of the file. Okay. So so it will reach here, but after reaching here, right, what it will do? There has to be some piece of code which needs to be executed. So what it will do is, in this file, you have to follow a certain pattern. What you have to do is you will have to create a function. Okay, you will create a function, give a name to that function. Let's say setup only. Whatever you want to give, right? You can give, and then you will write your logic, whatever you wanted to execute, and then in the end, right, you will export that setup, right, from here. Okay, you will export the setup. Now what happens here is you have given the path of this file over here, right? As soon as Playwright starts, Playwright will go to this file here, right? And it will expect it to have one single function which looks like this, right? Okay, which you are exporting from here. Okay, and it will call that function by itself. It will call that function by itself, and whatever is written there, right, will get executed. Okay, let me show you now. Similarly, the case with global teardown. Let's say this is a setup file, and there can be a teardown file. So you can create a teardown.ts file. Again, you can have a same function, teardown, and then you will need to export that teardown function, right? And once everything would be completed in the execution, Playwright will go to global teardown, see the file path, it will go there and run this piece of code, whatever is mentioned there. It will be executed. Let's see the example of a setup. Teardown works in a similar way. I have already created a file. If you see, right, I have created a file called GlobalSetup here, right, which looks like this. If you open it up, it looks like this. Async function GlobalSetup. Okay, any name you can give, right? It's not that it has to be this name only. It can be anything. And here, right, I'm writing console.log running GlobalSetup. Okay, you can write all the logic which you feel like, and then you have to export default this part. Similarly, in the global teardown also, you have to do this part only. Okay, something similar to this. And what you will do is you will go to your Playwright config here, right? Add a field called global setup, right? And then you have to give a path. You can give a path like this, but the recommended approach is that you should use require that what we have require dot resolve, and you will give a path here dot slash global setup dot ts. Okay, something like this. Similarly here also. Global teardown.ts. Okay. Now what will happen here is before executing any of your code, right, Playwright will first run this one, then run everything which Playwright has to do, and in the end it will run this teardown thing, right? So let me show you. Let's include TestMatch and just comment this out. What it will do is it will run this test case, and I've set fully parallel as true. Okay, let it be fully parallel as true. There is one problem here, right? Somehow teardown is not working in my case, but let's see whether it works this way or not. But let's just run this way. But this is how things has to be run. Okay, so let me npx playwright test. Let us see what happens here. If you see, right, the first thing which it ran was running global setup. Why? Because it would have gone to this file and it would have seen that this is the code which has to be executed, and it ran that. And now it is running things parallel in parallel, and the thing which I explained earlier. Right? Okay. If you see, right, in this case, it has not printed the teardown thing, right? It did not ran this. It should have done that. It should have done that. Somehow it is not functioning. I try to debug this and to understand, but I don't have an answer to it as of now. But the approach of working is this only, right? That you can use this part only. Why it is not working in my case, I will have to dig down. So let's see. If I'll get time, I will look into it. But the way to run this is this only. Okay. One last thing about this. One last thing. Playwright provides you uh, one thing, right? One add-on on these functions. What Playwright says is that if you want, right, if you want the access to your configuration file under these functions, if you are interested in that, right, Playwright can inject it for you. Okay. So what it means is that currently this function is not accepting any input, right? What it says is at max, either it can be blank like what we did as of now, or you could have you could create a variable here, right? Let's say config, right? And Playwright will inject, right, this config thing to I mean, what it will do is it will inject this configuration file, right? The object of this configuration file, which is what? Full config, the resolved configuration values. So it will inject it here. So what I will do is let me just import that thing over here, full config from here, right? And I will say that this config is of type full config. And what will happen here is if once Playwright, so what Playwright will do is Playwright will come here and see, okay, this needs to be executed. It will go to this file, right? And here it will see that, okay, To call this function, I will have to inject this configuration. So Playwright will do the dependency injection, right, under this function, and it will receive the value of the config. If you would like, right, you can access any property of the configuration from config here, config dot, right, and you will be able to access all the values from that file. Okay, and this is how it will function. We don't have a need as of now, so I'm not running it. I'm not showing you, but I just want you to be aware, right? So this is the global tear down and the global setup. There are two more fields which are available at the project level also. Let's use them also. This is the project, right? So here, let's see. Do we have global setup? If you see, right, I'm typing and I'm not getting an option. So it means that there is no such field. Let us see setup. Where is the setup? What do we call it as tear down? You see, there is a property called tear down for sure. Test setup. I think it would be test setup, or what do we call it as? Okay. I will have to check just a second. What is the property name? Test config, test project. So in the test project, we have tear down. Okay. Dependencies. Okay, dependencies. It is called dependencies here, not the setup. So in case of project level, right, you do not have these terms. Okay. So what you have here is you have dependencies, and you have a tear down. Okay, but the way these functions are very different to this. Here you have to give the path of the file, where the file should have this kind of a structure, right, a function, and that function needs to be exported, right? So that is how it works. But here in this case, right, what utility Playwright has provided is, but what you can do is that you can create any test case, right? Let's say a test case you will create with the name as setup test. Okay, setup test .ts, and here you will create a normal test case, right? A normal test case, the way you are creating it here, right? You get a normal test case. You will write everything you want to do on the UI in this test case, right? As a setup step. Okay, you will write a test case. So what will happen is this setup file has this test case, and what you will do here is you will first of all create a project, a separate project with a name as setup. Okay, and you will give the file here, right, to run this file over here. Okay, so now you have project one. Let's say you see you have project which is an array, right? Project is an array. You can have multiple projects here. So what I'm saying is, one of the project here you will create is like this. Okay, you will create it like this, and it will have a test match. I mean, a property called test match, which will be matching to this test case here. Setup file name, setup, right? Setup test case. So .ts, right? Now what you will do is you will use this project, let's say under under the other project, right, where you will have a dependency section, and here, right, you can put them as an array, and here you can give the name of this project over here. So as the name says dependencies, right, you can create multiple projects and create one of the project as a dependency on other, right? So now what will happen is, if you try to trigger this project, right, it will make sure that this project gets triggered first. And what do you have in this project? You have only this file, setup test, right? And you can write all your logic here. It will run this project, right? And then this project, whatever test case you will mention here, that will get executed. Okay, let me show you how. So till now we understood, right, the above part. Let me show you here, right? See here. So we currently have only one thing over here, right? Let me create a project. So this is a new project. I will give a name to it. Name, let's say, I will call it as a setup project. Whatever name I want, right? I can just give. Then what I will do here is I will provide the, let's say, this only. Let's say, and I will call it. I will create a test match, right? I will say that, okay, run that file, test match, and it has to be test. Let me create a file here. new file, test file 3.spec.ts. Okay, and this test file 3 will have the, I'll have to import okay, test from Playwright test, and we'll say test. Let me write the name as a setup test, and here we can have the body here, right? And in the body, again, it's like a normal function, right? You can just have the page here. Okay, I'll have to create a body of it, right? And I will create an arrow function, and that's it. Here, right, I will do what? Let's say I will open the page, page dot go to, right? Go to, and let's say I would like to run something, right? In this, see, what is this test case for? You want to set up something, right? So what it will do is it will go and do some user creation and all that. Okay, and then it will close and all, and it will close the test case. It will close the test case, and then the second test case, what will when the second test case is done, right? It, on the application there is something already created, right? Which could be a part of your setup. So let me just say https podtest.in. Okay, and we're good, right? So we ran this. Let me also print a console log so that we can see what really executed. Console.log running setup test, right? Setup test. Okay, great. Okay, what I did missed is I did not put async and await. Async, and this has to be await. Okay, great, right? So I have a setup test. Similarly, I can have a tear down. Let me get a tear down also very quickly. Let me just copy this file, paste here, rename. This will be test file 4. Okay, and here I will say this is a tear down step. It's a tear down setup, and here I will be calling tear down, running tear down test, right? HTTPS pod test. Let's say I'll be running here. Let's say Udemy. Okay, I'll open Udemy here. Okay, fine, right? So I have these two test cases now, test case 3, test case 4, right? Now I'll go to my file here. I'm creating a project called setup project, right? And I was trying to find the file, right? Let's see. You see, I have this file, and I think test case 3 was the setup file. So I created this project, great. And what I will do here is I'll create another project, which will be my tear down thing. I'll just copy paste this as is. And here I will change the file to test file 4, okay? And I will name this as tear down project. Tear down project, okay? And the last thing which I will do is, so these are the projects, right, which can do my setup. This is the project which can do my tear down, right? And I don't want to run them as is, right? I want them to run only with the test cases, right? With my real project. So this is my real project, right? This is my real project where the actual thing will run, right? So what I will do here is I will add here dependencies. Okay, and in the dependencies, the setup thing, right, should go in the dependencies part like this. Okay, and I also wanted to have a tear down thing. Tear down thing. And it will be why is this complaining? Okay, maybe I did not use the right terminology. Just a second. Let's write here tear down. So why it is complaining? Yeah, now it is not complaining. It is complaining again. What does it expect us to have? It expects us to have. Okay, it does. It directly wants the file name. No, I don't think. Just a second. Let me check on the over here. Tear down. What does it expect us to have? We can provide dependencies. We can provide. Okay, tear down can only be one thing. Okay, fine. Tear down has to be only one thing.
Not an array. It's not
Yeah,
an
it's
array.
not an array. No, it's not an array, right? So what we'll do is we'll just say this project name, tear down project, over here, and now it is very happy. Let me put it in single quotes, and we are done. Okay, now what will happen here is, now let's understand the entire thing, right? As per our, what do we see here? If you see, uh, I have set fully parallel as true. I have set my global setup file, and I have a global teardown. Then I also have mentioned that only run this file, test file one. Okay, now this is the global setup, right? Global setup. Now we also have a project level setting. So now once Playwright will be executing, it will go to the project level. It will see three projects here, right? Okay, I have to put a comma, right? Now there are three projects. If you want, right, you can still run this file. You can just run this project like you usually will run other projects. But this time, I know this is a setup project, right? And this should not be run as is, right? It should only be executed with some other project. This is a tear down project. Again, it should not be executed as is. If you want, you can run it, but it should be with some other projects. Now, this is that project, right? One such project. You can have so many other projects also, right? Okay. Now, the in the above we have a global setting. This is the project level setting. Anything which you override here, right, will be override on the global thing. So if you see, right, this is the name of the project. This is here we are defining the base URL, right? So you're overriding the global value. So if you see, the global value was what? Global value here was this part, YouTube. So you're overriding. You're overriding here. So this will be overridden to Udemy. Okay. And then you are defining here the dependency. So you're telling that before running this project, right? Before running this project, run this project. So this project should be triggered. Okay, this project should trigger, and here you have defined the file to run. This file. This will get triggered. Then what will happen here is it will come back and it will run what this file has to execute. What is that file? The one mentioned under here, right? TestMatch. If you want to override this, you can just copy paste this and make sure it exists here also, right? You can do this, or change the name of the file, right? And then once this file, and under this file you have two test cases, so those will be running. And then once everything is done with the sequence of before all and before each, in the end this tear down will run. Again, this is a project, so it will go back and run this project then, right? And once everything would be executed, what will happen is it should go up and run this global teardown, right? Right? This is how things will be executed, right? It should be executed in this way. Let me give a name to this global, like this. Okay. Now what I will do is, let's run this. I have all the settings here. Hopefully it should work. Okay. Just to make sure that you understand this, one last thing. A new board. Let me just try to write down the flow, right? What are we doing? Okay, so we have what we have done is we have set fully parallelly as true, right? We have the global setup file, we have a global teardown file. So right, so these two are in action. We have three projects. Let me write the setup project. This is setup project. This is the teardown project, and this is the normal project, the Chrome project. You could still have the Firefox project if you wanted to, right? So then in that case, you will have two projects. Okay, the actual real projects. Now you have test files, test file 1, test file 2, right? And here you have a before all, before each, test case 1, test case 2, right? And then you have after each, and then you have after all. Same concept is here also, right? In this file. Now you are setting fully parallel as true, and now you will run the code, right? npx playwright test. As soon as you trigger, what will happen? The global setup will run. Okay, this should run. Then it will do what? It will go to the project level, right? In the project level, right? Let's say when you ran this, right? This time I will not write like this. I will not execute my code just by saying this. No, I will do what? I will say npx playwright, and I will mention my project which I wanted to run. Otherwise, it will run all four projects, right? Like in sequence, right? It will run all the projects. I don't want to run them separately, right? I want this to run only with this. What I want is that that I should be saying here that run the Chrome. As soon as I will say this, right, it will just go and find the project with the name as Chrome and execute this. But before running this, right, it will see that what is the dependency here. It will see that setup is a dependency, so it will place dependent setup here, right, setup here, and then it will see that this is a tear down thing, so it will attach it here. It's a tear down, and this is how the sequence will be. It will run setup first, then the Chrome, and then the tear down. Okay, if you were saying project and let's say Firefox also, right, Firefox also, so this will run here like this, and even for the other things, right, it will run it in that sequence. Okay, but let's just focus on one part, Chrome part. So if you do this way, right, what will happen is global setup will run, then setup will run, right, then it will go to the Chrome part into your test case, which is going to run your this file, test file one. Here you're running test file, I mean fully parallel as true. So what will happen here is before all will run, then before each will run, test case one will run, after each will run, and after all will run. And parallelly, again the same thing would be happening before all, before each, test case two, after each, and after all. Once everything is done, it will now run. This is completed. Now it will go to the tear down. Now tear down will run, and then in the end it should run global tear down also. So this is the sequence of execution which should be there. Let's check it out. How is it really working or not? So what we'll do is we'll say npx playwright test. If you run it this way, right, just this way, it will select all the projects. But if you wanted to select the specific project, you will say this one, and you will give a name to your project. What is the name of my project which I wanted to run? This one. Run this. Let's see if there is no mistake how it runs. Okay, you can see running global setup. It is running 4 tests using 2 runners. Okay, why is it running 4 tests? Is it running? Okay, we'll see. Running, you can see, right, running global setup, it ran, right? Okay, I understood why it is saying 4 tests. We'll see like what will happen here. So now the test cases are running, right? Test case 1 and test case 2 is running in parallel. It completed, and now the tear down of the project should run. Okay, the tear down project is running. You can see Udemy 1. It is running this, and in the end, the project tear down should have run. Sorry, global tear down should have run, but there is a problem. It is not running. So let's ignore that part. But now see this again. Global setup ran. If you see this, global setup ran, right? Then it's saying 4 tests. Why 4 tests? There are 2 tests in the test case file, 1 test case in the setup file, in the setup project, 1 test case in the tear down project, right? That's why total there are four tests which are running. What ran first? It is saying running setup test, which is placed under which project? That setup project, right? Which is this file. So this thing ran, right? Once it executed, right, what happened after that? What happened after that? It ran before all in test file 1. So it went to this file, our normal project, right? It went to that project. Yeah, how you can see, right? It went and ran this file, test file 1. In test file 1, you have how many test cases? You have 2 test cases, test case 1 and test case 2, right? Test case 1 and test case 2. So see here, so it will run before all, right? Now it the problem with scrolling is it just changes all the text for me. Let me run it very quickly again. Okay, this time I will not scroll, hopefully. Let's see this in action. So you can see running setup test ran, right? So this part ran. Then let's see, now the actual test cases would be executing. You can see before all ran. Before all should run twice, okay, for every test case, because we are running fully parallel as true. So you can see before all ran, then before each ran, then before all ran for the second test case, then before each ran for the second test case. This is the tear down thing, right, which is running currently. So before each ran for second test case, then this was the test case executed. Then after each ran, then after all ran for the test case, and then parallelly test case 2 got executed after each, after all, and then so these things are done, right? So all of this is done, and then in the end it ran tear down, the tear down test, right? And in the end it should have ran this, which is not currently running. Okay, so this is how the flow is, right? You have to understand this cycle, right? You have to understand the cycle, and you have to understand that there it could be impacted because of the parameters which you're setting, right? So that's why I'm telling you like in depth about it. Okay, that this is the flow in which things run in Playwright. So you should be knowing about it so that you can design your test cases accordingly. Okay, one last thing about that dependencies and tear down. If you see here, right, this is global setup and tear down. So right, global setup and tear down, you can see over here there's a diagram which I wanted to show. If it shows up here, not here. Where is that tear down thing? It's not here. I just fix this. Where did it went? Parallelism here. No. Okay, I don't know where it went, but okay, I wanted to show you, but okay, never mind. I hope, right, you understood like how the sequence is, right? Global setup, then before all, before each, then a test case, then after each, then after all, then tear down, and then the global tear down. Okay, this is how the function is, right? Again, this is important to understand because it will help you to design test cases. Okay, so these are all the things, right, which I really wanted to convey. So we covered global setup, global teardown, fully parallel, dependencies, and the other part, and we understood like the impact of fully parallel on before all and before each for every test file. Okay, now, right, what next? What next? What we should start more? So I believe, but we are done with all the configuration thing, all the hooks, how to write test case. Now it's the good time to start with our browser automation. Okay, we took 6-7 classes just to reach here, but I hope it also signifies the impact, the depth of knowledge which you should have about this Playwright before jumping to write your single test case. Okay, now everything which we will do, right, it will be on the browser side, like how to automate things. So just to start with, there are three things which we have discussed earlier: browser, browser context, and page. These are fixtures in Playwright, right? What are fixtures? Fixtures are like they give you they give you some environment, right, to your test file to execute. And what Playwright does is, Playwright as a architecture, right, what Playwright does is, for your every test case, right, for your every test case, Playwright automatically creates a browser, right? It gives it's a browser depending on what you have defined in the configuration file. Let's say you have defined Chrome, so it will give a Chrome process to this test case, right? So it will know, okay, it has given Chrome to it. Now what it will also do is it will open a session for the Chrome, which is this session. So it will give a session also to it, right? And then it will also give a tab on that session, okay, which is called as a page. This is page, this is browser context, right? And this entire thing is running inside this browser, Chrome browser, right? If you wanted to open new context, new sessions, right, you can access them through this browser thing, right, which is this browser. So you will say browser dot new context and it will open a new session. You can keep on adding more and more sessions, right? Similarly, if you wanted to, in a browser context, you wanted to open new page, you will say browser context dot new page. It will open a new tab on it, right? So what I'm trying to tell you here is, by default, Playwright gives you three things for every test case, a isolated environment for every test case, so that one test case do not have any impact on the other test cases. Okay, this is how, this is what the architecture is, right? This is, and this is done through fixtures. Fixtures are like dependency injection in your test cases, which we have discussed earlier also. Okay, now let's come to the point. What I want to tell you here is, okay, what I want to tell you here is that we need to understand these three things, right, in detail. Okay, in detail, like what are the methods available on this object, and this object, right? Starting with, we will start with the browser part. Okay, with the browser part, let's see how to do that. We will have a test file. Let me just create a test file quickly. Test file, test. Let's create this test case only. Test file 1. Over here, let's create test case 3. This is test case 3. If you see, right, currently I'm injecting page, right? Page. Let's see what all is available. Can I write browser? You can see I have browser. Do I have the context? You can see I also have the context. Okay, so you have access to this, and there are other parameters which are available. Okay, which are available, but we are interested in these three, right? In a normal test case, you will never need this, right? Because what you would want in a test case, you would want to have a browser session opened up and a tab already opened up, right? And you would want to work on that tab, right? So you do not need that context, you do not need that browser. Okay, but if you want, you can access it. Playwright does give you the support, but what you will really need is the page, right? So in all my test cases, you will see that I am accessing only pages till now. Page, right? And nothing else, because it suffices my need. But just to give you, just to tell you, right, that you have the access to the browser also, and the browser context also, right, in your test case, which can be injected like this. Okay, await browser dot. If you see this, right, there are certain methods which are placed here, right? You can see there are a lot of methods which are placed here, which are coming from the browser level, right? Okay, so this is one thing which I wanted you to understand, that if you wanted to do something at the browser level, right? Let's say you wanted to open a new context. What you will do is, you will say new context. It will do what? It will open a new browser instance for you in that same browser. Okay, it will like, it's like it will open a new session for you, or let's say a new incognito mode kind of a profile for you. Okay, right? Like similarly, you can do other things with this browser. Okay, what are those? You can understand all those methods over here. We will go one by one, maybe from tomorrow onwards. I just wanted you to realize that this is how things will be. Browser. Okay, whatever we are accessing here, right? So this browser here, right? This is placed here. All these methods, right, are available at the browser level. Similarly, browser context. All these methods are available at the browser context. Okay, we will see what all we will understand. It's not that we have to understand all the things. There are only handful of methods which we'll go through, but we'll understand. Okay, similarly, at the page level, what all you can do at a page level. So all these methods are mentioned here, right? Again, you can see these are the methods here which we need to be aware of at the page level. And the last part, you should be knowing about the locators. How do you find things in your in the automation purpose, right, for Playwright? This is how it is, right? It is giving you all the methods available. If you have identified a locator, right, what all methods are available. This is like you're typing find element and the locator strategy to it dot, and what all methods you get all these methods on it, right? So these are all such methods. So these are the 4 different libraries which you need to understand. And there's a fifth one, which is the, not this one. Okay, we'll talk about like how to what strategy to use, right? Locator strategy. That is the fifth part which I will discuss later. Okay, so these are the 5 things for sure, right, which we will start with one by one. We'll start with browser first, then browser context, and then we'll move to the page part, and then we'll understand this locator thing. Okay, that is going to be the sequence of learning now, but we will do it tomorrow, not today. And for today, let's wrap it up. I don't want to cover anything else. We'll discuss tomorrow. Okay, on this part. Okay, any questions, anything till now? No. Okay. Okay, No worries. Okay. So Tejaswari, how you have been following Playwright? I cannot hear you if you say something. Okay, maybe some mic issue or something. Okay, no worries, no worries, right? Okay, but I hope you are following all the videos and you're able to be at pace with us. Okay, okay, thank you so much. Let's meet tomorrow. For tomorrow, right? I will tell in the morning whether we'll have a class in the morning or the evening. I'll update in the group chat. Okay, thank you, thank you. Have a nice day. Bye bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.